I traced the subtle lines of a half-finished ceramic vase, the cool, yielding clay a comforting contrast to the tension coiling in my stomach. In just 8 months, my life had become a study in contrasts. The vibrant, messy creativity of my ceramics studio versus the polished, suffocating world of the Holland family. I'm Brittany, an artist who dreamed of building a life filled with beauty and independence, a dream that felt increasingly out of reach since I married Ryan Holland, a man I loved, but who was inextricably tied to his parents' rigid orbit. Every Sunday dinner at the Holland estate was a performance, a carefully choreographed display of wealth, status, and unspoken rules. My hands, usually dusted with clay, felt alien and awkward holding delicate silverware under Carol Holland's scrutinizing gaze. Carol, with her impeccable pearls and perfectly coiffed hair, presided over the table like a queen on her throne, while Walter Holland, her husband, a man whose presence filled a room with quiet authority, observed with a detached, assessing air. "Brittany, darling, are you ready?" Ryan's voice, tight with familiar anxiety, floated up from the bottom of the stairs. "Mom just texted. Again, we're already pushing it." "Coming," I sighed, smoothing down the skirt of my dress. It was a dress I liked, simple and elegant, but I knew it would likely draw a silent critique. I grabbed a small, carefully wrapped box containing a ceramic bird sculpture I'd made, intended as a housewarming gift even 8 months in, a gesture I hoped might soften the edges of their perpetual disapproval, though I knew, deep down, it wouldn't. Nothing I did seemed to be quite right in their eyes. The drive to their estate, nestled in the most exclusive part of the suburbs, was a tense ritual. Ryan kept adjusting the rearview mirror, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Just try not to mention the studio too much tonight, okay?" he said, not looking at me. "Dad has some important business contacts over, and Mom wants to discuss the charity gala. She gets distracted by things outside her usual interests." "My work is my livelihood, Ryan," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "It's not a distraction." I know," he said quickly, the familiar weariness creeping into his tone. "It's just, tonight's important. Can we just get through it? For me, for him, always for him." It was a plea I heard often, a quiet surrender to the immense pressure his parents exerted. I loved Ryan, truly, but sometimes it felt like I was married not just to him, but to the entire formidable structure of the Holland family. The estate loomed before us, a grand brick edifice that felt less like a warm home and more like a fortress of tradition and judgment. Carol opened the door precisely as we reached it, a feat of timing that always unnerved me. "Right on time, how refreshing," she said, offering Ryan a brief, tight hug. Her eyes swept over me, lingering on my dress. "Brittany, lovely dress, is that practical for dinner?" I resisted the urge to check my outfit. "Yes, Carol, it's perfectly comfortable, and one of my favorites." Walter appeared behind her, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand, his gaze sharp and assessing. "Brittany, good to see you. Though I confess," he offered a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I'd hoped you might have reconsidered attending that art fair next month. Ryan tells me it conflicts directly with the country club's annual fundraiser, a very important networking event for him." The air immediately felt tighter. "My booth is booked, Walter," I said, trying to keep my voice firm, resisting the urge to shrink under his gaze. "It's a crucial opportunity for my business, to connect with collectors and galleries." "Business?" Carol's laugh was a brittle, dismissive sound. "A hobby is charming, dear, truly. A wonderful way to occupy your time. But Ryan needs a wife who is focused on supporting his career trajectory at Holland Industries and, of course, building a family legacy. These fairs seem to take up so much of your time and energy." The conversation was subtly, relentlessly steered away from my work throughout the evening. Mentions of my studio were met with polite, blank stares or swift changes of subject. The focus was on Ryan's burgeoning career at Holland Industries, the upcoming charity gala the Hollands were chairing, their extensive travel plans, their social calendar that seemed to dictate every moment of their lives, and increasingly, ours. Over coffee and dessert, the conversation circled back, more pointedly this time. "Brittany," Walter began, setting down his coffee cup with a decisive clink, "Carol and I have been discussing Ryan's future. It's time for him to step into a more senior role at Holland Industries, and with that, comes significant responsibility. We feel it's paramount that he has a partner who is fully aligned with that path. And frankly, he paused, his gaze unwavering, we believe the demands of your ceramics might be taking away from what truly matters, supporting Ryan and building your family. Carol leaned forward, her expression one of practiced, benevolent concern. Perhaps it's time to shift your focus, dear, wind down the artistic pursuits, and concentrate on what truly matters. A woman's greatest creation is her family. The words landed like a punch to the gut. It wasn't just disapproval anymore, it was a direct demand. My passion, my identity, my very livelihood were being targeted, framed as trivial obstacles to their grand design for Ryan's life. The ceramic bird I had brought sat unnoticed on a side table, a silent testament to everything they wanted me to leave behind. As we drove home in silence, the distance between Ryan and me felt vast, a chasm carved out by his parents' expectations. I looked out the window, the passing streetlights blurring through a sudden, hot welling of tears. But beneath the hurt, a spark ignited in my chest, small but fierce. They wanted to extinguish my fire, to mold me into their perfect, compliant daughter-in-law. Not without a fight. Not while there was still a flicker of resistance left in me. The week that followed was a masterclass in subtle pressure tactics. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from Carol invitations to luncheons with women I didn't know, suggestions for more suitable hobbies, perhaps flower arranging, dear. It's so much cleaner than clay, pointed questions to Ryan about my whereabouts during the day. Ryan, caught in the middle, would relay their concerns with a furrowed brow, urging me to just compromise a little for the sake of peace. Compromise? I exploded one evening, throwing a handful of clay onto my workbench. They don't want compromise, Ryan. They want capitulation. They want me to erase myself, my work, everything I've built. He flinched at my outburst. That's not fair, Brittany. They want what's best for us, for our future. Whose future? I challenged. Yours, theirs, or the one where I disappear into a life of charity galas and country club luncheons, pretending my hands don't itch for clay. He ran a hand through his hair, looking stressed. They've done so much for me, Britt. Everything I have. It's because of them, I owe them. You owe them respect, Ryan, not your soul, I said, my voice softening slightly, seeing the genuine conflict on his face. But his inability to stand up to them, to see their manipulation for what it was, left me feeling achingly alone. Hey, rough start to the week, my friend Megan asked, finding me hunched over my workbench the next day, trying to lose myself in the familiar process of throwing clay. A lawyer by profession, Megan possessed a sharp mind and a healthy skepticism for anyone who flaunted their wealth too loudly. You have no idea, I sighed, wiping my hands on my clay-stained apron. I showed her a text from Carol. Just a friendly reminder about the volunteer luncheon on Thursday. We're counting on you, darling. We do hope you'll wear something tasteful, perhaps less earthy. We are representing the family, after all. Less earthy, Megan snorted, dropping onto a stool. Your hands are literally covered in clay, Britt. That's your identity. She's not just criticizing your clothes, she's criticizing you. You need to put your foot down. I've tried, but Ryan? I trailed off, the familiar frustration rising. He just gets that look, trapped. He always defaults to whatever his parents want. He can't see it. He's been conditioned his whole life, Megan said, her voice serious. People like the Hollands, they excel at control. It's a subtle art, but devastatingly effective. They isolate you, undermine your confidence, make you question your own reality until you depend entirely on them. It feels exactly like that, I admitted, shaping the clay on the wheel, the rhythmic spin a small comfort. Like they're slowly trying to erase me. Have you talked to Adam? Megan suggested. Adam was Ryan's younger brother, the quiet one, the black sheep of the family who had stubbornly pursued a career as an investigative journalist. A path Carol and Walter barely acknowledged, probably because it involved digging into truths they preferred remained buried. He seemed to exist just outside their suffocating orbit, observing with a detached, knowing gaze. Not recently. He keeps a low profile. Just then, my studio door opened, and Adam stepped inside. He looked unusually formal for him, dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, his expression serious. Mind if I come in, Brittany? Need to talk. Alone. Megan gave me a quick, encouraging squeeze on the shoulder. I'll leave you two to it. Call me later, Britt. Adam closed the door behind him and sat on a stool, looking around the studio with a thoughtful expression. "It's peaceful in here," he commented. "It's my refuge," I said, turning off the wheel and wiping my hands. "Everything okay, Adam?" "That depends on your definition of okay," he said, his gaze meeting mine. "I heard Mom and Dad are really putting the screws on you about your work, and about accelerating the plans for a family." "It's getting worse," I confirmed, the knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "It feels less like pressure and more like they're actively trying to dismantle my life piece by piece, like they want to erase who I am." Adam leaned forward, lowering his voice. "They do. It's their MO. They've always controlled Ryan, every decision he makes, every relationship he has. They see you as a variable they can't control, an obstacle to their plan for him." "What plan?" "Getting Ryan fully integrated into Holland Industries, eventually taking over. And they have a very specific image they want to project: the perfect family, built on tradition and stability. You, with your independent spirit, your dedication to your art, your refusal to fit neatly into their box. You don't fit the mold they've created." "They want me to give up my studio," I stated, the reality hitting me with full force. Adam nodded grimly. "That's the immediate goal, but it's bigger than that. Look, Britt, my parents play dirty. They have their hands in everything in this town, financially, socially. They know how to make life incredibly difficult for people who cross them. People who threaten their image, their reputation." "Their image?" I thought about the pristine house, the polite smiles, the carefully curated public persona. What image are they protecting so fiercely? What are they hiding? Adam hesitated, his journalist's instincts warring with family loyalty, however strained. "Let's just say there are layers to the Holland family legacy that aren't in the official history books. Layers they've worked very, very hard to keep buried. The fortune wasn't built just on savvy investments and hard work, Brittany. There are casualties in their past." He looked towards the door, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Be careful. They don't take kindly to anyone digging too deep. They have the resources to make problems disappear." "Problems like people?" I asked softly. "Problems like inconvenient truths," he corrected, "and people who uncover them." He stood up. "I just wanted you to know what you're up against. Ryan, he won't see it. He's too deep in the narrative they've created for him, but you see things differently. That's why they're scared of you." After Adam left, his words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken warnings. Casualties, buried truths. The perfect image felt less like a shield and more like a facade hiding something rotten underneath. Later that day, at our usual cafe meeting spot, I met up with my other close friend, Sarah. Her family's small construction business had gone under years ago, seemingly overnight, after a major project they'd been awarded fell through, a project they'd landed with Holland Industries, only to have the contract abruptly canceled with no explanation. The sudden bankruptcy had devastated her family, forcing them to sell their home and fundamentally altering the course of their lives. Sarah's father, a proud, hardworking man, had never recovered. "Sarah, I need your help," I said, pouring out everything: the increasing pressure from Carol and Walter, the explicit ultimatum about my art, Adam's cryptic warnings about buried family secrets and casualties. Sarah listened intently, her expression growing more somber with every word. She knew the Hollands' reputation, but she also knew the quiet suffering her own family had endured. "The Hollands, they have a way of crushing people," she said, stirring her latte slowly. "My dad always suspected something wasn't right about that project falling through. It didn't make sense. They were doing well, everything was on track, and then nothing. Just silence, canceled contracts, and bankruptcy. He always felt like they were disposable, like they were used and then discarded." "Adam said they have secrets," I said, the pieces beginning to click into place. "Secrets tied to their image, something they're desperate to hide, something that hurt people." Sarah's eyes widened, a new, painful understanding dawning in them. "What kind of secrets?" "I don't know the specifics yet," I admitted, "but I think it might be connected to what happened to your family's business, to that project with Holland Industries." A flicker of anger ignited in Sarah's eyes, quickly followed by a raw vulnerability. "You think they did that on purpose? Ruined my dad's business?" "Adam mentioned casualties," I said softly, "and he said they've worked hard to keep things buried. My marketing brain, the part of me I used to build my own business, clicked into gear, analyzing possibilities. If their perfect reputation is their shield, if the Holland legacy is built on something they're hiding, maybe I can find a way to shatter it, make them feel the consequences of their actions. Sarah's hand trembled as she picked up her coffee cup. Be careful, Britt. If this is true, they're not just controlling parents, they're dangerous. They're already trying to dismantle my life, I said, the resolve hardening within me. They hurt your family, they hurt Adam in their own way. I can't let them keep doing this to people. To Ryan, to me. That night, lying awake beside a sleeping Ryan, the weight of everything pressed down on me. The silence in the room was deafening, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my mind. He was caught in the middle, loyal to his parents' narrative, blind to the pain it caused. But I knew I couldn't wait for him to choose, for him to suddenly see the light. I had to fight for myself, for my art, for my right to exist authentically within this marriage. The fight was coming, whether Ryan joined me or not, and I had to be ready. Adam's words and Sarah's pain fueled my determination. I wasn't just fighting for my studio anymore, I was fighting for the truth. The opportunity to dig deeper arrived, ironically, through another of Carol's demands. She requested my help organizing decades of documents for the annual Holland Family Foundation report. It's a tedious task, dear, she'd said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, but someone has to do it. And it's a wonderful way for you to familiarize yourself with the family's philanthropic endeavors. Perhaps it will give you a new perspective on what truly matters. She suggested I tackle the task while Ryan was at the country club with Walter, a clear attempt to isolate me, to ensure I wasn't distracted by my own work. I readily agreed. This wasn't just busy work, it was my chance. Armed with Adam's warnings and Sarah's suspicions, I approached the task with a different goal in mind. The sprawling estate felt less like a home and more like a vast archive of secrets. Walter's study, meticulously organized, was my target. Hours blurred by, filled with tax forms, investment portfolios, legal documents, and endless records of donations. I sifted through them carefully, looking for anything that felt out of place, anything that hinted at something hidden beneath the polished surface. Then I found it. Tucked away behind rows of leather-bound books, a discreetly labeled box that didn't fit the pattern of the foundation documents. Inside weren't donation receipts or charity reports, but older documents. Legal correspondence from the late 90s, old newspaper clippings preserved in brittle plastic sleeves, and financial statements from defunct company letterheads. One headline, in faded ink, jumped out at me. Local businesses devastated by Holland Industries' project collapse. My hands trembled as I carefully unfolded the clipping and read further. The article detailed the sudden and unexpected failure of a major commercial development project spearheaded by Holland Industries. It spoke of numerous smaller local contractors, suppliers, and investors who had lost everything when the project abruptly folded, leaving them with crippling debts and worthless contracts. As I scanned the list of affected businesses mentioned in the article, a name jumped out at me, the name of Sarah's father's construction company. This wasn't just a failed project, I realized, my heart pounding in my chest. This felt deliberate. As I delved deeper into the documents in the box, the picture grew clearer and far more sinister. Legal correspondence hinted at aggressive contract renegotiations just before the collapse. Financial statements showed assets being transferred away from the project-specific entities to other Holland Industries subsidiaries. There were internal memos discussing risk mitigation in chillingly detached language. It was a financial earthquake engineered by Holland Industries, designed to bury the smaller players while they emerged relatively unscathed, even profitable, having shed their financial obligations. The buried lawsuits, settled quietly with stringent non-disclosure agreements, were the final layer of secrecy. They had ruined these people, systematically and deliberately, and they had buried it all, the evidence, the lawsuits, the human cost, to protect their legacy. Adam's words echoed in my mind. Casualties, layers, worked very, very hard to keep buried. This was it. The dark heart of the Holland fortune. My phone buzzed, Megan texting. Got a minute? Quick question about that non-compete clause. My fingers fumbled as I typed the reply, my mind still reeling from the discovery. Meet me at the cafe, I wrote. Now, you won't believe what I just found. Bring your lawyer brain. At the cafe, the documents were spread across the small table, a stark contrast to the cheerful clatter of coffee cups. Megan, with her sharp legal mind, quickly grasped the implications as she pored over the papers. Brittany, this looks like deliberate financial sabotage, she said, her voice low and serious. They didn't just back out of a project. It looks like they orchestrated its failure. Squeezed these companies dry, then pulled the plug when there was nothing left to take. And look here, she pointed to a legal document, these quiet settlements, the non-disclosure agreements. They weren't about compensating the victims, they were about silencing them. They ruined these people, I whispered, the reality of Sarah's family's suffering hitting me with renewed force. The years of struggle, the lost home, her father's broken spirit. All because the Hollands prioritized profit and image over human lives. And they buried it to protect their legacy. This is huge, Brittany, Megan said, her expression grim. This isn't just about being controlling in-laws anymore. This is potentially criminal. Fraud, financial manipulation. Depending on the specifics, the statute of limitations might be an issue for criminal charges, but the civil implications. This could unravel everything they've built. Their reputation, Holland Industries, Ryan's future. Adam said they've worked hard to keep things buried, I recalled, the pieces clicking into place with terrifying clarity. This must be it. This is the secret they're terrified of getting out. But how do you prove it now? Megan asked, running a hand through her hair. It's decades old, and everyone they settled with signed ironclad NDAs. Their victims are legally bound to silence. Information is power, I repeated the phrase Adam had used. And I have the information. Now I need to figure out how to use it, not just for me, but for the people they silenced. I called Sarah, my voice trembling slightly as I told her what I'd found. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, then a choked sob. "Oh my God, Brittany," she whispered. "It was true. Dad wasn't crazy. They did it. They actually did it." Her voice hardened, laced with a pain and anger that had been simmering for years. "What can we do?" "We make them pay," I said, the resolve in my voice firm. "Not just financially. We make them face what they did. We use their precious image against them." Back at the estate, I carefully copied the relevant documents using their scanner, my hands shaking slightly, before meticulously replacing everything exactly as I had found it in Walter's study. Ryan returned from golf, looking relaxed and oblivious. "Rough day in the study?" he asked, noticing my slightly flushed face. "Just tedious," I said, forcing a smile. "Lots of old paperwork, learning about the foundation's history. Dad's talking seriously about me taking over as CEO next year," he said, loosening his tie, clearly eager to share this news. "Big shoes to fill. He says it's my duty to the family to continue the legacy." "And what do you say?" I asked, watching him, a new, heartbreaking understanding of the weight of that legacy settling over me. He shrugged, that familiar look of resignation clouding his features. "It's what's expected. It's what I've been working towards my whole life. Family comes first, you know?" He couldn't see it. He was so deeply entrenched in their narrative, so blinded by his loyalty and their manipulation, that he couldn't grasp the rot beneath the surface. I watched him walk away, the weight of his parents' expectations a physical burden on his shoulders, a burden he seemed willing to carry without question. Had he always been this way, or had years of conditioning molded him into this compliant version of the man I married? The man I was rapidly realizing I barely knew. My phone buzzed Adam. "Need to talk. Important. Coffee tomorrow." We met early the next morning at a small, independent coffee shop far from the usual Holland haunts. Adam was already there, looking tired but alert. "They're ramping up the pressure," he said as soon as I sat down, foregoing the usual pleasantries. "Mom told Ryan point-blank he needs to make you choose the family and his future at Holland Industries, or your art and everything that comes with it. She even suggested expediting the baby plans, said it would give you a proper focus and make you less restless." My blood ran cold. "They're not just controlling my life," I said, the words like ice in my mouth. "They're actively planning it, mapping out my entire existence without any input from me." "They've done it before," Adam confirmed, his gaze steady. "They orchestrated cousin Emily's marriage to someone who would advance the family's social standing, controlled her husband's career path, dictated where they lived. It's how they maintain their hold on the family, how they ensure everyone serves the legacy. Well, I found something that puts that legacy in a very different light, I said, leaning forward. Documents about Holland Industries years ago. Financial stuff. It looks like they deliberately engineered the failure of a major project, driving several local businesses into bankruptcy. Adam's eyes widened, a flicker of shock replacing his usual composure. You found that. I've heard whispers, rumors in the industry, but I never thought there was concrete proof. I certainly never saw any documents. There's proof, I said. It looks like they ruined Sarah's father's business, Adam, and likely several others. Adam went quiet for a long moment, his expression darkening. That project, one of the contractors who went bankrupt, his son was my best friend growing up. We were inseparable. After his family lost everything, they had to move away, start over somewhere else. We lost touch completely. Just gone. I never understood exactly what happened, just that his dad's business failed because of the Holland project. He looked at me, his gaze intense, filled with a pain I hadn't seen before. Be careful, Brittany. If this gets out, it could bring down everything. Their reputation, Holland Industries, everything, they'll fight dirty. With everything they have. They're already fighting dirty, I said, the resolve in my voice firm. They're trying to force me to abandon my life, my art, everything that makes me me. They hurt Sarah's family, they hurt yours indirectly by taking away your friend. I can't let them keep doing this to people. To Ryan, to me. My phone lit up with a text from Carol. Sunday dinner, non-negotiable. Ryan and I need to discuss your recent decisions. Your absence from the volunteer luncheon was noted, darling. A cold calm settled over me, a sense of clarity sharpening my focus. They wanted to corner me, to box me in, to force me into submission. But I had found the key to their cage. Perfect timing, I said, showing the text to Adam. They're planning an ambush at dinner. A public dressing down, I imagine. But what if I ambush them instead? Brittany, Adam warned again, his voice laced with concern. This is playing with fire. My parents. They destroy people who threaten them. They have the means to bury you. They're already trying to bury me, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. Maybe it's time they saw what it feels like to lose something precious. Something they've worked so hard to protect. Their perfect image. Adam studied my face, recognizing the steel in my gaze. What are you planning? I'm bringing dessert, I said, the idea forming fully in my mind. A special surprise meal. A taste of their own medicine, perhaps. Sunday arrived, heavy with anticipation. I spent the morning not sketching or sculpting, but meticulously organizing the copies of the documents I'd found. The newspaper clipping, the financial statements, the legal letters, the internal memos. Megan had helped me understand the legal implications, confirming that while criminal charges might be difficult, the civil damage and reputational fallout could be devastating. Now it was about presentation, about timing, about maximum impact. I decided to bring an apple pie for dessert, a deceptively simple, comforting dish that was the antithesis of the complex, hidden rot I was about to expose. As I peeled and sliced the apples, my hands moved automatically, my mind racing with the possibilities, the risks, the potential fallout. Are you sure about this, Britt? Sarah asked over the phone, her voice filled with both apprehension and a fierce hope. She knew, better than anyone, what this could mean for her family's history, for her father's memory. As sure as I can be, I replied, placing the lattice crust over the pie. It's the only way I can see to make them understand. To make them face what they did, not just to me, but to everyone they hurt. Adam's meeting us there. He is, I confirmed. He understands what's at stake. He'll back me up. The drive to the estate felt less like a social call and more like a journey into enemy territory. Ryan was oblivious, chatting about his golf game with Walter that morning, completely unaware of the metaphorical storm gathering around him. He didn't notice my hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel, the weight of the documents in my bag feeling heavier than lead. Adam met us at the door, his usual casual demeanor replaced by a tense readiness. He gave me a quick, knowing look. They're in rare form, he murmured as he helped me with the pie box. Mom's been rehearsing her concerned mother routine all afternoon, practicing her disappointed sighs. Good, I said, a grim satisfaction settling over me. I carried the pie into the kitchen, the sweet smell a bizarre counterpoint to the bitterness coiling in my stomach. Let's give them something real to be concerned about. The dining room was set for a formal meal, the crystals sparkling, the silver gleaming, the setting one of impeccable taste and controlled opulence. Carol and Walter sat at the heads of the long table, their postures radiating an aura of effortless authority. Ryan and Adam took their usual places on one side, leaving me alone on the other, a visual divide that perfectly mirrored the emotional and philosophical chasm between us. The power dynamic wasn't lost on me. They intended to isolate and overpower me. Before we dine, Carol began, her hands folded serenely on the table, her gaze fixed on me, we need to address your recent choices, Brittany. Your repeated absence from important family functions, your continued focus on pursuits that offer little long-term stability, your apparent reluctance to embrace your role in this family. It's causing us some concern. Her voice, though soft, was laced with a steel I knew all too well. My choices? I sat down, placing my bag discreetly beside my chair, the weight of its contents a physical anchor for my resolve. Please, Carol, elaborate. Your persistent focus on your hobby, Carol said, choosing her words carefully as if speaking to a recalcitrant child. Your reluctance to embrace your responsibilities, your independence. It's not conducive to building the kind of future Ryan needs. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest, cutting through her rehearsed monologue, I've been quite focused on responsibilities lately, particularly the responsibilities this family has avoided for decades. Walter's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing. What exactly do you mean by that, Brittany? I reached into my bag, my fingers closing around the brittle newspaper clipping. I pulled it out slowly, deliberately, and laid it on the pristine white tablecloth, sliding it towards them. I found this while I was organizing documents for the foundation report. It sparked my curiosity. It led me to look deeper. Carol's face, usually so carefully composed, paled visibly. Walter stiffened, his jaw tightening. Ryan looked bewildered, his eyes darting between his parents and the clipping. What is that? Ryan asked, his voice a whisper. It's about a project Holland Industries managed years ago, I explained, my gaze fixed on Carol and Walter, ignoring Ryan for a moment. The one that resulted in the devastation of several local businesses. Businesses like Sarah's father's construction company. That's ancient history, Walter blustered, his voice louder now, attempting to regain control. A regrettable business downturn, nothing more. A downturn you engineered, I countered, my voice gaining strength, the years of suppressed frustration and the weight of the victims' stories fueling my courage. I pulled out copies of the financial statements, the legal correspondence, the internal memos, laying them out on the table, a damning paper trail. This wasn't just a business downturn, Walter. This was a calculated act of sabotage. These documents show a deliberate pattern of squeezing out smaller competitors, then pulling the plug when there was nothing left to take, leaving them bankrupt. And burying it all with non-disclosure agreements and quiet settlements to protect your perfect image. Brittany, Ryan exclaimed again, his voice louder, clearly distressed. What are you doing? Showing you who your parents really are, Ryan, I said, turning to look at him, the pain in his eyes a reflection of the pain I felt for him, for the truth he was being forced to confront. The families they destroyed, the lives they upended, all for profit, for power, for the sake of a legacy built on deceit and hidden casualties. I looked back at Carol and Walter, who were staring at the documents as if they were venomous snakes. Was it worth it? All for the sake of appearances, for the sake of a legacy built on deceit? You have no right to these documents, Carol said, her voice trembling with anger and fear. This is confidential. I have every right, I said, standing up from the table, the sudden movement drawing everyone's attention. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady, unwavering. Those families had rights too, rights you trampled on. Just like you're trying to trample on my right to have my own career, my own life, my own identity. You want to control everything, dictate everything, make everyone conform to your narrow vision. Walter slammed his fist on the table, making the silverware jump. This is blackmail, you won't get away with this. I already have, I said, a grim smile touching my lips. Copies of these documents are with people who know exactly what to do with them. Lawyers, Adam's contacts in the press. One move against me, one more attempt to control my life or Ryan's, and everything comes out. Every detail of how you built your fortune on the backs of others. Every family you destroyed will have their story told. Ryan, Carol turned to her son, her voice suddenly pleading, desperate. Do something, control your wife. But Ryan wasn't looking at his mother. He was staring at the documents on the table, his face pale, his eyes wide with dawning horror and disbelief. Mom, Dad, is this true? Did you really do this? Ruin those businesses? Those families? Carol and Walter exchanged a swift, panicked look. It was complicated, son, Walter said, his voice tight, attempting to regain some semblance of control. Business decisions are often difficult. There were unforeseen circumstances. Yes or no? Ryan pressed, his voice gaining an edge I hadn't heard before, cutting through his father's deflection. Did you deliberately engineer that project's failure to bankrupt those companies? Carol sighed, a fragile sound, her perfect facade cracking under the pressure. There were unfortunate consequences for some involved, she admitted, her gaze fixed on the table. Unfortunate consequences. Ryan's voice rose, laced with pain. Was it necessary to destroy Sarah's father's business, to drive him to bankruptcy? To force them to leave town? His daughter was my friend, Dad, did you even know that? We did what was necessary, Walter repeated, his voice colder now, defensive. For the family, for our future, to protect Holland Industries. For your power, Adam said, his voice quiet but firm, finally speaking up. He looked at his parents with a profound disappointment. You destroyed people, Dad, people I knew, people Ryan knew, all for this illusion you've created. Adam, stay out of this, Carol snapped, turning her anger towards her younger son. No, Carol, I said, stepping fully away from the table. Adam's right. This isn't just about a secret business deal from the past. This is about a pattern of control, of manipulation, of using people and discarding them for your own gain. You did it to those families, and you've been doing it to Ryan his whole life, molding him into the son you want him to be, not the man he could be. And you tried to do it to me. You are making a terrible mistake, Brittany, Walter said, rising slowly from his chair, his presence suddenly menacing. We can make your life impossible. We have the resources. We have the connections. More impossible than trying to erase who I am? I asked, meeting his gaze squarely, refusing to back down. More impossible than living a lie in this gilded cage? I don't think so. I've already faced the worst you could throw at me trying to break my spirit, and I didn't break. I held their gaze, my fear replaced by a quiet, unwavering resolve. Here are my terms. You cease all interference in my life and my career. You make full financial restitution to the families you destroyed, publicly, acknowledging the harm you caused. And you release Ryan from your control, allowing him to live his own life, make his own choices. Or the documents go public, every single detail. Your choice. The tension in the room was suffocating, thick with unspoken threats and crumbling power. Carol and Walter looked cornered, their usual arrogance replaced by a chilling fear of exposure. Ryan looked devastated, his face pale and drawn, caught between the crushing weight of his past and the shocking, undeniable truth of his family. Adam stood back slightly, observing, his expression grim but determined. This is outrageous, Carol's lawyer, who had quietly arrived and was observing the scene with increasing alarm, finally interjected. My clients will not be blackmailed. Is it? Megan countered, stepping forward from where she had been standing near the entrance, a formidable presence in her sharp suit. We have irrefutable proof of financial malfeasance and the subsequent cover-up. The choice, Mr. Sterling, is simple. Cooperate and mitigate the damage, protecting what little reputation your clients have left or face public exposure and the potential legal ramifications that could follow even after all these years. A class action lawsuit, for starters. The media frenzy alone would be catastrophic. Walter finally spoke, his voice flat and devoid of its usual authority. You win, Brittany. The agreement was drafted, reviewed, and signed in a sterile conference room a week later. A stark contrast to the opulent dining room where the truth had been unveiled. Carol and Walter, stripped of their usual power dynamic, sat across from me and Megan, their lawyer hovering anxiously. Adam sat beside me, a silent show of support, a tangible representation of a different kind of family loyalty. Ryan was not present. He was staying with a friend, processing everything that had transpired, the comfortable, familiar narrative of his life shattered. The terms were clear, negotiated fiercely by Megan and Sandra, the senior partner she'd brought in. Significant financial restitution to the affected families, based on a comprehensive investigation of their losses, overseen by a neutral party. A public statement issued by Holland Industries acknowledging the past injustices and expressing regret, carefully worded, but an admission nonetheless, and a complete cessation of any interference in my life or career. There was also a quiet, separate clause about the dissolution of my marriage to Ryan, a mutual decision reached with painful understanding. "You've destroyed this family," Carol said, her voice brittle, her hand trembling slightly as she signed the papers. "No, Carol," I replied, my voice steady, feeling a profound sense of weariness more than triumph. "You built this family on a foundation of deceit and the suffering of others. I just brought the truth to light. That's not destruction, it's exposure." Walter signed with a grimace, his face a mask of defeat. "I hope you're happy, Brittany. You've alienated the man you supposedly love. You've cost him his future." "Ryan needs to find his own path, Walter," I said, thinking of the lost look in his eyes at the dinner table. "One that isn't dictated by you. One built on integrity, not inherited wealth and hidden secrets." The cost had been high, the end of my marriage, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that I couldn't have stayed and been true to myself. As Rhea signed, her hand trembling, Jeffrey pulled out his phone. "I've already contacted the first family you destroyed. They're eager to hear your apology." After the papers were signed, we left the office. The air outside felt crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the stuffy, tense atmosphere inside. Adam hugged me tightly in the hallway. "You did it, Britt," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "You actually did it. You made them accountable. For everyone they hurt. For us." Outside, Sarah and Megan were waiting, their faces alight with a mixture of apprehension and fierce hope. They had been my unwavering support throughout this ordeal. "Is it real?" Sarah asked, her voice thick with emotion, looking at the signed documents in my hand. "It's real," I confirmed, holding up the signed agreement. "They're paying back the families, publicly, and they're out of my life, for good." "What about Ryan?" Megan asked softly, glancing back at the imposing office building. "He's choosing his own way now," I said. It hurt, the quiet dissolution of my marriage, the loss of the future I'd envisioned. But I knew it was necessary. He needed space to figure out who he was without his parents pulling the strings, without the weight of their tainted legacy crushing him. It was a painful freedom for both of us. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica Henderson, the daughter of the restaurant owner from the original story, now representing the families affected by the Holland scandal. "Dad cried when he heard. Said he can finally rest. Thank you, Brittany. You gave him peace." Reading that, the ache in my heart eased, replaced by a quiet sense of profound satisfaction. This wasn't just about my battle. It was about setting things right for others, for acknowledging the past and demanding accountability. As we walked towards our cars, leaving the sterile building behind, I saw Carol and Walter getting into their town car, their posture defeated, their faces grim. Carol glanced at me, her expression a complex mix of resentment, anger, and something that looked faintly, almost imperceptibly, like fear. "You won't get away with this, Brittany," she muttered, loud enough for me to hear, the old habit of issuing threats ingrained deep within her. I met her gaze squarely, no longer intimidated, no longer shrinking under her disapproval. "I already have, Carol," I said, my voice clear and steady. "The truth always finds its way out. And sometimes, facing the truth is the only way to be truly free." Adam stood beside me, a silent testament to a different kind of family loyalty, one built on integrity and truth, not obligation and deceit. "Drinks?" Sarah suggested, a wide, genuine smile finally breaking through her tears, a smile that spoke of burdens lifted and justice served. "Absolutely," I said, feeling a lightness in my chest that had been absent for months. "But first, I need to make a few calls. There are some families who deserve to hear the good news directly from me." The setting sun painted the sky with vibrant, fiery colors, a stark contrast to the gray walls of the law office we had just left. My heart felt full, not with a sense of victory over another person, but with a quiet, deep-seated peace. I had fought not just for myself, but for those who couldn't fight back, for the truth that had been buried for too long. And in doing so, I had found my own strength, forged in the fire of conflict, ready to mold a new future, piece by painstaking piece on my own terms. Weeks turned into months, each day feeling lighter, freer than the last. My small ceramic business began to flourish. The story of the Holland Industries scandal broke in the local paper, handled with careful, fact-based reporting by Adam, who ensured the focus remained on the restitution and the long-overdue justice for the affected families, rather than sensationalism. Carol and Walter, their carefully constructed public image shattered, retreated almost entirely from public life, their social standing decimated. Holland Industries faced investigations and lawsuits, forcing them to restructure and operate with a level of transparency they had always avoided. Ryan was still finding his footing, navigating a world without his parents' constant direction. Adam kept me updated occasionally. Ryan had started seeing a therapist, grappling with the realization that his entire life had been shaped by his parents' deceit and control. It was a painful process, but Adam seemed hopeful he was finally starting to build an identity independent of the Holland legacy. One sunny afternoon, as I was glazing a batch of new mugs in my studio, the doorbell rang. It was Adam, holding a bottle of champagne. "Restitution payments are being made like clockwork," he reported, stepping inside, a wide grin on his face. "The PR nightmare is worse than Mom and Dad ever imagined, but the families are finally getting some closure, some justice. Sarah's dad is even talking about starting a small consulting business." "That's the best news," I said, setting down my brush. The real victory wasn't the Holland's downfall, but the chance for others to rebuild. And he hesitated, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. "I had coffee with Jessica Henderson last week, the artist from the old cafe downtown." My heart gave a little flutter. Adam had mentioned her a few times since their first meeting after the settlement. "Really? How was it?" "Good," he grinned, his eyes sparkling. "Really good. She's amazing, Britt. So much life, so much talent. We talked for hours. About art, about life, about everything. We toasted to new beginnings, to breaking cycles of control and silence, to finding happiness in unexpected places." Later that week, I received a package at the studio. It was from Ryan. Inside was my ceramic housewarming gift, the little bird sculpture I had given them months ago, carefully wrapped in tissue paper. Along with it was a short, handwritten note. "I'm so sorry, Brittany, for everything. For not seeing it sooner. Thank you for being brave enough to break the mold, even when I wasn't. I hope you can find peace and happiness. Maybe someday you can forgive me. Good luck with everything. Ryan." I held the ceramic piece, turning it in my hands. It no longer felt like a symbol of suffocation or a rejected offering, but of resilience. It had come back to me, transformed, just as I had been. One evening, as I was cleaning up my studio, the unexpected sight of a car pulling up outside made me pause. Carol stepped out alone. She looked different, smaller somehow. Her expensive clothes seemed to hang on her, and her usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled. Her face, stripped of its usual layers of makeup and composure, showed the strain of the past months. My friends had warned me she might try something, but this wasn't the formidable, controlling Carol Holland I knew. This was a woman who looked like she had lost her way. "May I come in, Brittany?" she asked, her voice hesitant, lacking its usual sharp edge. I paused, surprised by her appearance, unsure of her motives. But something in her eyes, a raw vulnerability I had never seen before, made me step aside and open the door wider. She stepped inside, looking around the studio, her gaze taking in the tools, the clay, the half-finished pieces scattered around. The organized chaos that was my creative space. "It's messy," she said, a faint, almost instinctive echo of her old critical tone. "It's where I create," I replied simply, not defensive, just stating a fact. She clasped her hands together, twisting them nervously. I wanted to see you, to tell you." She swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder. "Morgan's business is suffering. The unpleasantness has had repercussions. Social circles have shifted. It's been difficult." "The truth can be difficult, Carol," I said, my voice gentle, recognizing the genuine pain beneath her stilted words. "I know," she said, her voice cracking slightly. And for the first time, I heard a flicker of genuine emotion, of vulnerability in her voice. We were wrong, Brittany, so wrong. We were so focused on building an empire, on maintaining appearances, on control, that we lost sight of what truly mattered. We hurt people. We hurt our own sons. We hurt you. I waited, unsure what to say, what she expected. I don't expect forgiveness, she continued, tears welling in her eyes, blurring the sharp lines of her usually impeccable makeup. But I needed you to know. I see it now. What we did. What you did. You showed us the cracks in our perfect facade. You exposed the ugliness we tried so hard to hide. And while it's painful, devastating in fact, maybe it was necessary. Maybe it was the only way we could ever see. She looked at a piece I was working on, a vibrant, abstract sculpture, the clay bold and expressive. "It's beautiful," she murmured, a genuine compliment that held no trace of her old condescension. "Thank you," I said, surprised by her sincerity, by the unexpected moment of connection. She turned to leave, her posture still slightly slumped, her usual regal bearing diminished. She paused at the door, looking back at me. "Ryan, he seems happier, lighter. Adam too, you didn't just break the mold, Brittany. You gave them permission to step outside of it." She met my eyes, her expression a complex mix of regret, resignation, and something that looked, finally, like a flicker of genuine, painful understanding. "Thank you." After she left, the studio felt quiet, but not empty. It was filled with the scent of clay, the promise of creation, and a profound sense of peace. I stood among my finished and unfinished pieces, feeling the solid presence of my work, my passion, my freedom. The fight had been long and hard, filled with betrayal, pain, and the shattering of illusions, but it had led me here. I was no longer defined by my in-laws' expectations, my failed marriage, or the secrets I had uncovered. I was Brittany, an artist, a survivor, a woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her own true path. And that, I realized, was more than enough.